Building off of that, another thing that has been implemented since the start related to membership is that you do have to be active within 90 days. So there is a rule that if you're not active within 90 days, you do get reminders that you will be removed, and you can rejoin whenever you want. But the idea here is if you're not active, we would prefer to remove you from the community so that folks who are active in this space can feel comfortable sharing whatever it is that they want to share and have that psychological safety, because you never want to feel like there are random people who can jump into this space and read what you're saying but not participate.
Welcome to Community Dissection, where we dissect online communities to give you an inside look at community design, architecture, and evolution. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Community Dissection. In this episode, we are dissecting the community evolution behind a community that I am a huge fan of. I was so excited when it first started and have loved seeing how it's evolved by two fabulous community builders who are joining us today. They run the community. They are going to tell us a little bit more about how the community has changed, how it got started. So I want to welcome Nikki and Jocelyn. Can you all introduce yourselves? Maybe Nikki, you can go first.
Yeah, hi. I'm Nikki Toto. My pronouns are she, her. I am the founder and co-lead of the community, and my work community chops come from Shopify and now Calix, where I have the pleasure of leading a team there. So I'll turn it over to Jocelyn.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Sue. My pronouns are also she, her, and I'm currently co-leading the community with Nikki. In my day job, I'm the head of community at Supernova, which is a design systems platform. And then before that, I was a director of creator community at Jocelyn.
They loved community so much. They wanted it for the day job and the night job. So let's dive into how it all started. How did this all begin? And Nikki, I'll let you take it away because I think, Jocelyn, you came on to the team. Yeah, okay. So you guys tell us the story.
So the community started because I got laid off and I was trying to get a pulse of the community industry, but from a senior lens, because I was at that level and I was going to be applying to roles in that space. And I went seeking out a space like this, but I couldn't find anything. There are some communities, but I found that wasn't one where I felt like I could ask a question and have it answered by the humans that I wanted to answer that question and have it answered authentically, because the industry is so small and I didn't know if I would get authentic opinions about the current state of the industry by asking in those spaces. And so I started meeting with one-on-one with senior community professionals. And it got to the point where I was like, this is not going to be sustainable for the long haul. And I can't be the only one who wants to have these conversations. And I thought there's no better time than when you're laid off to start a project. And so I started the community. And the intention behind this space is to have the conversations that you'd want to have with folks who just kind of get it. As community humans, I think we all understand what a community is for, but it's specifically for senior community professionals. But our main priority, the metric I care most about, is whether the members feel safe to post within the space. And so everything we do ladders into that psychological safety as a baseline.
Where did that metric come from? That being kind of your compass of what you're most concerned about?
I think it comes from, I see the community as an employee resource group for the industry. And I have a history in women's employee resource group or resource group building. And one of the main pillars of identity-based groups is oftentimes feeling that psychological safety. And when you can find the right combination of process and ritual that encourages that psychological safety, then you get the most rich conversations. And so I wanted to mimic that within this space, because I believe that it's incredibly necessary to have the types of conversations that need to be had in order for us as senior community professionals to feel a sense of belonging, but also for us as senior community professionals to push the industry forward.
I love it. I was taking notes on, because one of my follow-up questions was going to be, who is this for and what happens here? So I heard you say it's for senior community professionals, but this community essentially operates as a human resources department for community managers at large and the community industry at large. Jocelyn, did you have anything you would add to like who is this for and what it's for?
I would agree with what Nikki was saying. I think one thing I did want to add in terms of psychological safety and like how it began is I remember seeing the community, I guess, launched on LinkedIn, essentially. I remember seeing that. It was really exciting. I was like, cool, a space for senior community professionals. Signed up to join and then like got added to Slack. And I think to Nikki's point about psychological safety, one of the reasons why I stayed and became really active is because I saw her modeling behavior that was going to like promote psychological safety. So at the very beginning, I remember like the first week or so, there were actually a couple like promotional posts or people who like weren't super senior, and Nikki took action really immediately to make sure that the community actually followed the guidelines that she had put in place and was going to be a community for senior professionals. And I think seeing that made it very clear to me that it would actually be a space for senior professionals and we could be authentic and honest and like be our full selves and like speak about the industry honestly, because she and other people in the space would make sure that those guidelines were followed and we could actually be like authentic.
What I heard you say in that was that it's not enough just to state the purpose, but what really gave you confidence in remaining active in the community was seeing like the purpose and those boundaries be drawn, but also reinforced. And as a community builder, it can be so hard to provide that guidance and that like to create that container. And especially when you have to be like really specific about what the boundaries are. But you're exactly right in that it ultimately serves the members who you are intended to serve when you do that. Awesome. So I wanted to share a little bit about what I go here for, because maybe this will be like somewhat of positive feedback for you all. But and then I'd love to open it up to like, what else have you noticed? Like what happens here? What are some of the programs? Just give us the lay of the land. So I come to the community. It's my favorite place to come for advice and sort of like philosophical community discussions if we want to like put our pinkies up and like have some deep conversation. It also is like I have noticed, I think what you've done such a great job of doing, it comes back to that psychological safety, because I think when you get a bunch of senior people in the same room together, you can kind of like, you just want to impress each other. And I've noticed that in other communities for community people, like we're all kind of trying to like, you know, show our stuff, but also be open and like curious. But I think, Nikki, you have done such a good job of saying like, it's okay to come as your full self here. And like, this is the place where community managers can kind of let down. And especially for senior community people who don't get the chance to do that very often in their circles. So that's primarily like advice and conversation, connection with other community people. It's like, if I know a community person is in like 3 different Slack communities, I'll hit them up in the community because I'm like, this is probably the one that they're checking the most frequently. But what else happens here? What are some of the programs? What are some of the like experiences that you facilitate there?
I'm going to talk to the historical, what we've done before that did not work. And then I'll let Jocelyn take the things that we're doing now that are they working? Good question. But the things that we've tried in the past were monthly meetups. And these were like casual in nature, but with like one overarching topic. So we knew we were coming about maybe like talking about being laid off as the topic, but there was no real structure. It was just coming together and talking about that topic. And what we found was that there was interest at first, maybe 10 people would show up to the room and have like this really great conversation. And then through time, we found that I would sometimes be sitting in the room alone and no one would show up. And so when that happened, we knew we kind of had to recalibrate. And so now we have some other stuff going on, and I'll let Jocelyn take that.
Yeah, so one of the things we have is the weekly happy hours, which happen on, I want to say Tuesday at 1 p.m. for Pacific time. I always honestly forget until Nikki sends a reminder, or I'm like, there's notifications in Slack, let me go check. And I think one of the things that I really love about this is because it's virtual and all in Slack, I can randomly hop in as I'm working on something or even respond to things as I'm listening to another call. It's just a lot easier than like committing to sitting down for an hour in a Zoom, which I think was one of the downfalls of the monthly hangout. It's just a larger commitment. So we have those virtual happy hours. And we've also talked about moving forward, doing more structured sessions around like resource creation or discussions around really specific topics so that people can really dive deep and talk shop, because some of the feedback we've heard in our quarterly surveys is a desire to get deeper in things and really create resources and workshop things together. And we've also heard a desire to get even, I don't know if more senior is the right word, but there are some folks who've been in the group who've been doing community for like 10 to 15 years versus people who've done it for like 3 to 5. And we look for folks who are 3+ along with some other things. So there are people who've been doing this for like years and years and years. And so there is that desire to like talk even deeper. So being able to put together some of those sessions and having those topics be a little bit more catered are some of the things that we're planning on testing starting actually next month in September.
Awesome. I love it. You mentioned a quarterly survey, and I'm curious, like, what were some of the questions that you asked that helped tease out that feedback from the community?
Yeah, so the quarterly survey is the same every quarter. And of course, we have some like open answer questions. But essentially, the beginning of that survey is this a safe space for you? And then some like CSAT and NPS scores questions, asking if people have gotten value from the community. And then having an open question around, what's missing for you? And then we talk about career impact too. So has this had an impact on your career at all? Because eventually I'm bullish on the idea that maybe 5 years down the road, it's a requirement or a bonus if you're a part of the community for job applications. So if you're more senior, if you've already been vetted by this space, that it's a bonus for when you're looking for a job. But in order for that to be true, there has to be large impact to your career. And so baby steps into that, but we do get a lot of feedback from that question as well of like, this doesn't have any impact to my career because this is what I would need for that to happen.
Yeah. So going back to what you were sharing about how you pivoted some of those programs, I think that's one of the best things that you can do as a community builder is continue to iterate and grow and learn and capture that feedback. But like, how did you know what direction to take next when you were like, Nikki, when you're sitting in that meeting and you're like, no one showed up? Like, how do you know it's just not quite the topic that people want, or like, it's not the format? How did you distill some of those questions down?
Yeah. So because we do quarterly surveys, you only fail for a quarter and then you get feedback. And throughout that quarter, because I think as community humans, what we understand is that it can be a mixture of things. Like it's the summer in the Northern Hemisphere right now. And so a lot of people go away and go on trips, and they're just not as present after work hours or even during work hours in these types of spaces. And so you do have to take that kind of stuff into consideration. But throughout that quarter, when you spend, many an hour sitting in a room by yourself, hoping someone will show up, you can change things from the way that you announce that it's going to happen to what time it's at to what the topic is. You can trial all those things in that 90-day period so that you get some good information about, is it this thing or is it the way that I'm delivering this thing?
Yeah, that's great. I think the feedback is essential in creating those feedback loops. I want to pause for a moment because it's worth mentioning that we are doing a member experience dissection of this community as well. So if that has been published, I'll link to it in the video right here. If it's coming out soon and it's not quite published yet, just subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified when a new community dissection releases. Is there anything else you want to touch on that has like changed or evolved in the community since you first launched it?
One of the big things was in one of the surveys that we put out, we got feedback that someone didn't feel safe to post in the community. And when they said why, we were very lucky that they shared why. And it was because they were a person of color and they didn't feel represented within the group. And so I think one of the things that we know by nature right now in systematic America is it's a struggle for folks who are maybe not male presenting or maybe not white. And so it really opened my eyes to the fact that I need to be way more intentional about how I go about membership drives. So instead of just, hey, if you want to apply. A lot of times, so this last membership drive, what I've done is go specifically make a list of humans that I want in the space and send them messages. And what was shocking to me were the amount of people who thought, oh, I didn't consider myself a senior in this space, or I wasn't sure that I would be considered good enough to be in this space. And so that's one of the big ways in which the community has changed, is the way that we approach membership. It's not just like, oh, if you want to be here, be here. It's really an intentional act now.
I think building off of that, another thing that has been implemented since the start related to membership is that you do have to be active within 90 days. So there is a rule that if you're not active within 90 days, you do get reminders that you will be removed, and you can rejoin whenever you want. But the idea here is, if you're not active, we would prefer to remove you from the community so that folks who are active in the space can feel comfortable sharing whatever it is that they want to share and have that psychological safety, because you never want to feel like there are random people who can jump into the space and like read what you're saying, but not participate. And that kind of feels like someone's just kind of like watching you when you're trying to be vulnerable and actually share and ask questions. And so we do have this rule now where if you're not active in 90 days, you do get removed. There are reminders, of course, and things like reactions also count, and like responses to threads. So it is really easy to stay active, but it is a requirement and a request that we make of folks who are in the space that you are actively participating, so that people who are in it feel comfortable continuing to share.
Jocelyn, say it louder for the people in the back. I'm just like, this is like one of my biggest soapboxes. And I think it's when you are creating a community space that is like holding and containing vulnerability, having an invisible, like arena-sized crowd that could be lurking in the background is your number one enemy to creating that connection and vulnerability. It's so much harder. Even if you can't like technically see, but having those little mechanisms in place, again, you're inviting people in. You're not saying like, get active where we're kicking you out, but you're saying like, hey, we're all in the arena together. So like, come on down off the stands. Like you have to make sure you're in the arena collaborating together. You don't have to be like the top contributor, but that has such a huge impact on the psychological safety in a space. So thank you for doing that. I'm so glad that you touched on that. Nikki, I also wanted to touch on your point about reaching out to potential members, because I've had a similar experience, even just here within the community dissection episodes. So I have like a list of people that I'll email once a month and say like, anyone can join any of these episodes. And it's so easy to like, just blast out your message. And then when people don't respond, be like, oh, no one likes me. Like, no one wants to join this amazing thing that I'm building. And I had the same thing where I was like, I think I'm being just like a touch lazy right now. And I think just like 2 calories more effort of like identifying and saying like, hey, Nikki, we're dissecting this community. I would love to have your voice at the table, because you just don't know what the story is that someone is telling themselves about like their worthiness or their expertise, or like they should or they shouldn't join. Yeah. So taking that extra, like taking the initiative to cross that bridge for them and say, like, we want to invite you. Like if you're struggling with people like RSVPing to events or like joining you as an expert or like anything like that in your community, I invite you to like extend the baton all the way, like run it over to them. Don't wait for them to come to you.
If you're enjoying our community dissection episodes and have a community of your own, then I invite you to download our community audit checklist. This is a quick list of things that you can go through and identify in your community that you have, are missing, or might need to be clarified. So don't wait today to improve your own community. And if you're interested in having your community dissected by me and a couple other community professionals, you can nominate your community through the form in the description.
Yeah, I love that point of like, you don't know what they're telling themselves. Because to us, I'm just like, what do you mean? You are so, I learned from you and you're not even in the community yet. But yeah, you don't know what they're telling themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's especially important for minorities, people of color, for women, because you're way more likely to feel like you're not an expert. Even if you could have like 10 years of experience more than somebody else, you just kind of feel like, oh, that's not me. The expert is not me. I'm not the senior person. And so really reaching out to those folks, especially when you want to get better representation, is so key.
Is there a specific community design element? It can be like super teeny tiny, or it can be like a big fundamental part of your community. Is there any design element that you're most proud of in the community?
That is such a good question. I mean, like, I'm really proud of the caliber of question that people ask. And we've, in our onboarding, it's evolved since even Bri, you came in. In our onboarding, we're really intentional about what kind of question we ask you to ask and the amount of context we ask you to include. And so I think, like, having had that intentionality set in stone has been really cool. Whenever we see someone post, the amount of people who can come in, and within 2 hours, you have people who, like, I would have loved to just have answer my question are like in on this thread being like, oh, this is what I would do. This is my experience. This is what I would do. Because you've given enough context around why you're asking that question that they have the time that, oh, in 5 minutes, I can tell you exactly what I did with that. And so I think that's what I'm most proud of, is like, we've set a precedent for what type of question and how much context you give. I'm really proud of that.
I feel like a lot of people like to brand things a lot or make things sound super fun, or I don't know, like alliteration or whatever. And we both just really like literal names. Like, it is the community, and we're co-leads. And instead of coming with like some fun random name, I appreciate that everything's really literal. Like, there's general, there's introductions. You talk about team management in the team management channel. And it's just like, everything's very straightforward, which I really appreciate, because I feel like there's just so much jargon in the world that I like that we're not adding to that. Like, I do think there's power in like in language and like people knowing what you're talking about, but the literalness and not having to explain what something means, I think, can also be really helpful and powerful. So it's a really accessible space. Like, you can just join and you know what every channel is about. You don't have to read a description, and it's not really necessary to explain to people what the purpose of a channel is for, because job opportunities is for job opportunities.
Oh my gosh, I completely agree. I think it also, because you all have built in Slack, especially when you're building in that platform, it's so important to keep it really clear, because you don't get the space to like share additional context unless you're willing to like read through the entire channel. And I totally agree. It's like insider language. I think it can be done really well. Like, I think of Rosieland. Hopefully I'll link to this episode because we're also dissecting Rosieland. She does a phenomenal job of creating this like world that you enter into. And I think there's like a sense of belonging that happens once you identify yourself as on the in crowd. But it's also, it's pretty difficult to do. It's a nuanced work. And I think when people are entering your community, and especially a community of practice, they might not want to enter a whole new world. And so creating that simplicity, and especially starting with simplicity and being really mindful if you do enter into any world building or like insider language, being really mindful about how you execute that. And I think, yeah, I appreciate the simplicity too. It makes it nice and easy to comprehend. So you talked about the metric of like, do people feel safe to post in this community? What are some of the other metrics that you like to track or that you keep tabs on?
Yeah, I mean, keeping with simplicity, one of the things that so I think in our day jobs, those types of communities, we're going to be looking at different engagement levels and hoping to increase those engagement levels. But for us, it's not important if there's a post every day. Like, if there was no post today, I wouldn't worry, because the intention is value and not noise. And so we don't look at engagement metrics as a sign of success. I would be worried if there weren't a post a week or a post every third day. I think we're at that point where we should be having a post that often. But instead, on our survey, what we look for is psychological safety. We look at value, impact to career, and our NPS. And so we only care about those because we really want to be, if everything's important, nothing's important. And so it just goes to what our 3 pillars are, which is to be a safe space, to help impact careers, and to bring value to members.
I love the hyper focus on those 3. You said creating a safe space, impacting careers, and bringing value to members. And it goes back to it's a thread throughout everything that you all are saying, which is by remaining super committed and laser focused on our target, we're able to have a greater impact. And when we make it so broad, it really loses depth and meaning and becomes a space that's so generic that it essentially can become obsolete. So I love the hyper focus. I think it's super smart and a great example for communities of practice moving forward. Awesome. Okay, last question unless there's anything else you want to share, but is there anything that you're looking forward to changing in the near future about the community programs or design or anything that's coming up?
So one thing that we are doing is our first in-person event. So we're doing a community unconference, and we're going to be gathering senior community professionals to do an unconference in person. The topics of all of those things are TBD because it is an unconference. We're super excited to really be able to meet folks in person and kind of take what we've done in Slack and bring it to real life.
Wait, is the location determined yet? Can you guys come to Big Island? Is Hawaii on the docket for potential locations?
We're taking advantage of another conference, and so it's clipped onto the end of CMX Shine, and so we have a density. If you look at the population of folks within the community, you have a density of folks in that area, and then we also have a bunch of folks who are coming for the conference. So we're utilizing that as a jumping off point.
Okay. Oh man, I wasn't planning on going to CMX this year, but maybe now I want to. That's yeah. Okay, you guys might get me. Awesome. Super excited for that. We'll also include the tout and link to join the community in the description, as well as, are you going to be have a separate place for that conference, or is it just for members?
It is only for members. So yeah, one thing to note is that we do onboard in cohorts. And so those happen at the end of the quarter.
Real quick, can you tell us more about why you decided to go with the cohort-based model for membership applications?
1,000%. So when we first started, I honestly thought it was going to be 5 people, or if I was lucky, all 15 people I asked would come and join me in this community. But when I launched it, I got 150 applications. And I was not ready for that. I really thought we would just build as we went. We are building as we go, but in front of more eyeballs than intended. This contributes to psychological safety. So it's much like that 90-day deactivation or you need to be active within 90 days. This way, people can't just show up in the middle of feeling safe. There's a cadence that the community understands that, every 90 days, there'll be new people who come in. And so it's just a way for us to continue to build that psychological safety while also being true to the fact that this is not a day job for Jocelyn and I. And so a lot goes into vetting members. And so we want to make sure that that's an intentional process that we can do really well when we do it. And so it just happens that it also contributes to psychological safety. So we're really glad to be able to do it every quarter.
So I can imagine that there's probably some people, I think this is a fabulous example of how to launch a community of practice and iterate right off the bat. And I'd love to use it as a fabulous model for that. I'm imagining that there's some people watching who are I have this idea for a community of practice. I have a full-time job, but I could see myself doing a community on the side. The thing that I'm so stoked about, I'd love to gather people around it too. Mm-hmm. How much time does this take from you all? Or not take from you, that's probably a poor way of framing it, but how much time does this take in your schedule? How do you manage that with this being sort of an extra thing on top of your full-time jobs?
Yeah, I think what's really important when you start something like this, and for us, we're never going to charge for the space. I think accessibility to this space is really important. And so I'm asking Jocelyn to come on and volunteer. And so I get value from this space because I needed this space. I need this space to further my career. And so there has to be value from that. And so I don't keep track it's what needs to get done. I love checking the space. I'm in the space. I'm involved with it. And so it's definitely more on the month that we're onboarding new humans. But yeah, I would say I could not accurately quantify it. It can't be more than, an hour a week on some weeks. And then as you get closer and closer to ramping up either a new program or getting people into the community, then you end up spending probably more, 5-6 hours.
Yeah, I think it's hard to answer because I was spending so much time in this space as a member anyway, just because it was fun to see what people were asking and like reading all the threads. And there were and still are some like really great conversations, even about community things that like I'm not actively doing, but can still learn from. And then also just like talking to other community friends in like group chats or on DMs. So it's really hard to be like, as a co-lead, I spend X number of hours. I would say that like at least bucket a couple of hours a week for if there are things that are happening, then it really should be something that you're like excited about and don't feel like it's an extra job on top of your regular job. And I think that's what's fun about this is I also just really love community people. And so I enjoy spending time with more community people. But yeah, to Nikki's point, I would say when recruitment or applications roll around is when there's like things we need to do on a certain time frame because that's what we told other people we would do, versus like if we're busy one month and don't want to do events in the summer, we cannot do events over the summer and no one will be upset. It's really when we tell cohorts that we're going to be adding folks and onboarding folks where we do have to live up to the expectations that we put out into the world.
Yeah, there is a freedom with setting those expectations yourself, but then there's certain routine expectations like we will accept new members, maybe come back to haunt you later on. No, but I think it's a great point to start a community for something that you love and notice the communities that you're already a part of. And if there's like a gap in there, you all belong to a lot of communities for community people. And you saw this little like niche gap of like, there's not quite something for senior community professionals. And so my encouragement to anybody who's like has a community idea nagging in the back of their brain, notice where you're already involved and your current habits, and maybe just instead of pouring that into other communities or other programs, create something that's a little bit more niche and that you're going to be the most excited about. Okay, you all, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we pop off here?
Thank you so much. It's fun to talk about like the build behind the community. So often we just do, and we don't think, how did I do? Or how is this different? Or you're just like, oh, I have a problem. I'll find a solution. And so it was nice to kind of formulate some thoughts around, oh, these are like the concrete things we do.
Jocelyn and Nikki, thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your time and generously sharing yourselves in the leadership of the community. As a member, I can personally thank you. And anybody else, any other members who are watching this, like feel free to comment, spread some love for Nikki and Jocelyn. They do so much and empower all of us to like move not just our careers forward, but the industry forward. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And if you're looking for a fabulous example of a community of practice, this is the best place to start. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Like and subscribe for more episodes, and we'll see y'all soon.